Thank you for introducing me, Ellen. This is really lovely to hear how diverse this group is. I'm really happy to hear some of you already that have done advanced research. Some of you have a background in anthropology. So this talk or discussion is going to be very participative. So I really hope to, hear your insights and get your ideas at the end and also throughout. So if you want to also interrupt and ask a question or clarification during the presentation, please feel free to do that. So I'm a Tamimova, and Ellen introduced me. Basically, I'm an anthropologist. I feel that now that I have a PhD in anthropology, I can say that I'm an anthropologist. Before I used to say I'm an anthropology student, but now I kind of feel that I am growing into an anthropologist. I think I've grown into one. And I'm interested in issues of political violence, security, urban security. That's what I work on usually. And of course, participant observation is the core method in anthropology. But as we will go further in this lecture, you will see that it is best paired. It's best when it's paired with other research methods, and we can talk a little bit about that. It is a very strong tool, and without delaying this any further, we're just gonna share the outline with you. So we're gonna discuss the importance, use approaches of participant observation, most important thing about it, which is ethics and identity. How do you design your research with participant observation in mind? Practical guidelines for those of you who just want to try it for the first time and really want to know how to start. We'll talk about that. Note-taking, which is the main way how you collect your data analysis, overcoming challenges, and then the fun part, the Q&A, where we get to talk about your project as well. So the main thing that I want to say about participant observation is that it is a very individual thing, right? It is a way of experiencing the world with your research participants. So it is quite subjective. These are things that need to be incorporated into the research design and the data analysis. But what I want to say from the very beginning is that you grow into a participant observer. It doesn't happen like overnight. It is a craft that takes some time to hone and some time to, control the way you collect your data. So if this is the first time you're using participant observation, be patient, try it out. You're going to grow into it with time. And you, as the researcher, you have the capital is in you. You're the valuable asset here. So the longer you do it, the more trained you become. Just to, preface this. So what is participant observation? Probably a lot of you know already what it is, but it is an interpretive and iterative process where the researcher internalizes the way of thinking, acting, behaving, feeling of their studied research group. And this is done through frequent exposure and sharing of experiences. In anthropology, they call it hanging out, although this is a bit of an outdated term. It is when you have this long-term, in-depth fieldwork with a defined research group. You participate in activities, even in ones that are not particularly appealing to you. And this is very important to take into consideration. When you are hanging out and participant observing, it's not only what you want to be doing all the time. It's not about your preferences and your comfort. You will be put in situations where you really don't want to necessarily be there, or it's boring, or it's not relevant to you, but this is still part of your data collection, still part of your fieldwork. Despite the participation part, you are still an observer, and this is something really important to remember. You do need to maintain a level of detachment and keep in mind what your purpose is and what your research is. And I know this sounds very simple, but believe me that you do lose focus when you immerse yourself in a community or a group that you're studying. And the longer you are with that research group, or who eventually sometimes become your friends, your interlocutors, Sometimes what happens is that you get so involved in daily life that you stop seeing it as data. You start seeing it as life experiences. So this is the part that needs a bit of training. It is both a tool for data collection and data analysis. So as I said, you as the researcher, you are the asset here. You are the tool for data collection, data analysis. You need to have faith in yourself, and you do need to have a bit of courage, and you just need to take it like as it comes. And finally, what I really want to say, it is a very subjective experience, but it is also the closest you're going to get to your research community, to understanding their worlds. In a way, this gives you very high precision, and you can be confident with your data, which is something that is really nice to have, this confidence in your data. Key issues just before we get into the more practical things. So obviously, participant observation requires long-term relationship building with your research participants. You can't always be selective in what activities you're participating in. I already mentioned this. There are a lot of examples in anthropology where, anthropologists had to take part in gendered labor or gendered work, things that are expected of their research communities, but that maybe we ourselves don't do. But this is something to expect during fieldwork. It's impolite to say no to tasks that are given to you. And also something to keep in mind, maybe as we go forward also, is that a lot of research groups treat you as a guest at first and really want to help you and please you and give you good treatment. And especially like us, we do research in the Middle East, people are incredibly kind and open. And just to keep in mind that you don't want to use that too much. You want to be very clear about, that you're not only a guest, you're there to do something, you're there to collect data, clarify it from the start. Your identity is going to really direct the knowledge that you're producing. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So you really need to be reflective during the process. And as I said before, it's best when it's paired with other methods, semi-structured interviews, life histories, case research, etc. And I say this because, again, it's very easy to sometimes slip into a work that you feel is just yours, that you are the one experiencing and collecting this data, and you are this, researcher who is really integrated into your research community. What happens sometimes is that, you stop seeing things objectively in a way, and you do need other works to ground you. And not only does it make your research of better quality, but it also, you need to be in conversation with other research methods. We can talk about that later in the Q&A. So what is it used for? Obviously, sociological, anthropological works. Now I'm hearing more and more that it's incorporated into IR, political science research, in ways that are long and extended, that involve fieldwork. It's used for if there's a huge project, where you're going to put in a lot of money into a big project, you would want to go and do some scoping to see if you're doing things correctly, if you're hitting the right tone with your research. It's used in humanitarian intervention development, especially in areas like, for example, that agricultural areas where there are huge agricultural projects or development projects, or refugee aid. Participant observation is really used to kind of like direct funding to these communities. And the fourth use is a bit exploitative. Also, this is something that's emerging and it's not really great. It's used in marketing research, which I was also a bit surprised, but in a way, it is the oldest anthropological colonial legacy. So going on, who is it used on? This might come like as really like this is already things that you know, but it's good to talk about. So the cultural other, this is kind of really emerging from anthropology's like old colonial history, when anthropologists were dispatched into faraway places where, that had limited contact with outsiders. Of course, this is not the case anymore, but anthropologists still choose and like choosing places that are inaccessible, where you only need to use the local language to get your data. And there is always like this kind of perception of difference, of cultural difference. A second target is subcultures, and this is a strong one. So subcultures, by definition, is a cultural group that has beliefs or politics that are different than the norm or than the majority. And in many places, subcultures are connected to, they could be any subcultures. It could be music subcultures, it could be activist subcultures, but also there are subcultures of delinquency. And anthropologists and social scientists in general are very attracted to that, because the longer you spend time in subcultures, you realize how they work and how they are self-sufficient and how there is a lot of, things holding it together. So, for example, there are a lot of really good works on organized crime, on lower income neighborhoods with higher violence. Amazing studies that show you how these groups kind of stay together, and how they reproduce social, economic kind of ties that keep the subculture going, and why it's important. So in a way, it kind of removes this label of delinquency being wrong or delinquency being bad, because when you look at it more in depth, you really see how it is held together also through positive things. Minorities, obviously, this is a huge interest now in minorities and minority activism. Social scientists tend to, look at how marginalized groups get together, mobilize, they work on rights, and how they interact, how minorities interact with structures of oppression. This is a huge trend for academics today. It's a great way of platforming the voices of, people who are really trying to make a difference, but it also has its risks, which we'll discuss. And finally, which I feel maybe might be a bit of what is happening here, is that you are also studying your own and your own culture. This obviously opens up massive doors of opportunity. You know the language, you know the customs, the code of ethics. It makes it easier for you. But at the same time, it also is harder to be an observer in your own community, because everything feels normal and comfortable to you. And so also, it also means that it really affects the quality of your data. So you do need to still have a foot in, foot out, even when studying your own. Okay. At the end of the day, it's all about access. The access that you get is the research community that you're going to work with. Not every research community is ready to talk to you. Not everyone is like waiting, to be approached by you so that you do your master's or PhD thesis on them. You really need to be also a bit, smart about it, and deal with, plan Bs and Cs and Ds sometimes. So I'm not going to waste more time on this, but just basically horizontal knowledge, when you are really earning the respect of the community you're working with, there's some sort of like horizontal knowledge exchange, and you can, co-produce knowledge with this community. In a more personal way, it's actually very exciting, because you work on yourself. You maybe need to learn another language. You need to change where you live. These are huge opportunities in life to do, and if you have the chance, they're amazing and they're great. Working on yourself. And as I said before, higher level of precision and confidence in your own work. So there's a comment. Okay. We'll get, yeah. So while planning your research project, a couple of things to keep in mind. Well, gender, race, and class. So who you are really determines what research you can conduct. It's not, it's just what it is. The earlier you accept this, the better your research will be. Think carefully about why you are choosing this research group. Like, it's actually a very simple question, but it needs a lot of reflection. What is it that you're really trying to answer? Is it something, that speaks to you in some way? Write this all down, because as you go through your fieldwork and as you do participant observation, there might be a tendency to forget why you're doing this. So write down exactly what are your intentions and why you're choosing this group. Beware of falling into the I'm capable of only studying my own narrative, which is something that I also feel with Arab scholars a lot, and something that I was like, thinking about myself a lot as well. That I know Arabic, so I'm going to work with Arabic speakers and Arab communities, and it's limiting in a way. It kind of limits your horizons and potentials, because the world is big and there's a lot of research to be done. For example, I just heard the other day of a Tunisian woman who is interested in German neo-Nazi groups, and she actually did get access to work with them and to study them. Obviously, like, the information she's getting is a particular kind, but the same way, it's good to break these barriers. We also don't want to normalize the fact that scholars from our region are only capable of studying this region. We need to also take it upwards, take it north, and also we are completely capable of studying, European culture, global North cultures. So it's just about really believing that. Women and men have access to their research participants in different ways, and that's okay. That's really okay. Actually, as a woman, you do have more access into men's worlds sometimes than men have into women's worlds. So it is a powerful tool in fieldwork. I don't want to generalize here, of course, but from what I've seen with my colleagues, men are sometimes tested for their knowledge, or sometimes when you're in a situation, you're even tested for your physical strength. You need to prove yourself a lot, I feel, as a man. And these are things that are just examples. Obviously, everyone has a different experience of fieldwork, but women can slip through the cracks sometimes in easier ways than you would think. So yeah, but obviously gender matters. It matters where you can walk, at what time you can return at night, who you can hang out with, how long you can stay with people. All of this needs to go into your notes. Yeah, don't lie about yourself. Don't try to minimize your accomplishments or who you are, because your research participants will see through that. Don't try to be, this humble, like, oh, I'm just a researcher here, like in the fringe, doing participant observation with you. No, be very honest about who you are, specify exactly who you work with, tell them why you are there. But also, don't go around lounging and I don't know, like really wearing lots of jewelry. And depends on the context, of course, but also don't really show your privilege either. And I'm sure we're all on the same page here. And a very important one, if you're an activist and you're really passionate about a certain cause that you're working with, and I heard some of you are working on activist groups as well. Something that I learned also from my own work is that don't enforce your activism on your research group. We can get very passionate about it sometimes and really want to, do something. But it's better to also have like this a little bit of distance and not to become the center of the story yourself. That's what matters. So, ethics and safety. I'm sure a lot of you have had experiences with this. You're dealing with human subjects, so it's a really rigorous ethical process. My ethical clearance for my PhD took 6 months, so get it in early and also think about everything. So the most important thing when thinking about your ethics is consent, obviously. Informed consent. If you approach your research group and you tell them exactly what you're doing, if you walk into a room and go from one person to another explaining to them who you are and what you're doing, this might not work out for you. What you really want to do is talk to one person who has some social or political capital in your group, introduce yourself to them, explain exactly what you're doing, get their consent, and then ask that person to also, maybe introduce you. And if there are any questions, they can be directed to this person. You need to be as detailed as you can in your ethics application. You need to think about anonymizing your research participants, how to store your data. Your university is in charge of reviewing your ethics application, but at the end of the day, it really is your responsibility, and it is really up to you to protect your research participants. If someone has, I'm not sure if you had a session exactly on consent, but there's also something called implied consent, which is very vague, but implied consent matters. Maybe there are certain situations when you're sitting with a group of people, you're not just going to stand up and say, hello, everyone, I need your consent. I want to, everything that you're going to say in this group is going to end up on my notebook. You wouldn't do it that way, but when it comes to, for example, introducing yourself, you would say, I'm here, I'm a researcher, I'll be listening to your opinions and to your thoughts, and I might take them into consideration for my research. This is like a way of kind of doing implied consent in a very controlled situation where you know that you don't know the people, and you're just listening to a group discussion, for example. When it comes to people who you need to be extremely explicit with your informed consent. You need to say exactly what your data is going to be used for, how you're going to anonymize them. And this is something that as you go, you will build stronger and stronger relationships with your interlocutors, and this is not going to be an issue. So, and another point, if you are dealing with high profile, a group that has like a high profile or famous people or known people, even if you try your best to anonymize them, some details about them might be public knowledge. So you need to be very clear about that risk. And you should be as vague as possible when you're describing them, but also don't make up stuff. Don't say things that are not true to cover someone's identity. You don't know what can happen with that. We can talk about this later, but your safety is as important as that of your research participants. Nothing is worth putting yourself in danger. There have been a couple of works where anthropologists got really into, participant observation and really participating in ways that were not necessarily legal or just because they wanted to stick to their research group and show them that they're part of them. Be careful of that. Nothing is worth it. Really, and don't be drawn into very sensational issues that might, you think that might make your work interesting, but that might have some risk for you on the long run or, even on the short term. And your work will not be considered better if you're involved in risky behavior. It will not. Maybe it was 20 years ago, like having these very interesting topics, very flashy titles. But nowadays, actually, ethics is valued more than anything. Safety is valued more than anything. So just keep that in mind. And think about how your research will affect your research participants on the long run. You're going to leave their lives eventually, but they're staying and living their lives with the effects of having known you. So keep that in mind. Now, selecting a research topic. So I think all of you already have your research topics and you know how to get there, obviously. When you are thinking about planning or designing research with participant observation in mind, I think the most important thing is think carefully why it is important to you. And it's a long journey. You're going to be participating and observing a lot for a really long time. So make sure it's important to you. You're doing it for a reason. You're going to sit with it for a while. Now to decide what you're going to be researching. Obviously, I think you already know this, but you need to do an extensive literature review, read widely on the issue you're interested in, but also different studies that are conducted on the region you're studying. So if you're interested in activism, it's okay to read stuff related to agriculture development. It's okay. Get in as many perspectives as you can. It will be really helpful for you. List all the methods that are necessary for you to obtain your data. Participant observation is not always enough. As we said before, it needs to be paired with other things. Picking a place for you to answer your question, make sure that you have a list of places and communities that could answer your research question. Because often what happens is that a lot of researchers just really want to study this particular community in this particular place, and then something happens and their entire research falls apart. So make sure that you stay flexible, that you have other places where you can conduct research, and make sure that your question is clear. And there are many places where you can answer your question. It's not this or nothing situation. Being flexible is the most important thing. Be specific on inclusion and exclusion criteria for your research groups. Even if you're working with a smaller research group, you cannot hang out with everyone all the time. And there are loyalties to consider. So, you need to be very clear with yourself about who you're going to be hanging out with and how you're going to, be loyal to them. This is important. And then, of course, as you know, you develop your strategy for data collection, management, and analysis. And for research with participant observation, this you develop further down the line. So you can think about how you're going to analyze your data and how you're going to use what methodologies you'll use for that early on, but it will definitely change because, again, participant observation opens up so many different opportunities for you that you don't even know exist when you're thinking about your project in the beginning. So, preparing for the field. Get in touch with local organizations. I'm sure all of you already work in the field, you have your contacts. This is very important. They will advise you on the security situation. They will also advise you if there has been any research that was overly sensitive or disliked by people that you might work with. This happened a couple of times where you enter a field site where someone, was not liked or was seen as a negative influence on their lives, or there was some problem with data collection or ethics. Make sure you know about this so that when you enter the field and someone asks you, oh, you're just like that researcher, right? Like you're doing the same thing. And you should say exactly why you're not like that researcher. And you should know your facts. This happened to me as well. In the beginning, there was this ghost, of this researcher who did something in the community, got some information, and then published it in a way that, it wasn't a researcher, it was a journalist, actually. And so everyone was really worried that I might do the same thing. And I had to be very clear how I'm not a journalist, how, I'm not behind a sensational story, etc., etc. So be sure to know this. Get introduced to gatekeepers who might be working in the local organizations, but also try to gently move beyond them as well. The relationship between you as a researcher and gatekeepers is a complex one, which we can get into in the Q&A. It is not always advantageous for you to go through a gatekeeper because there are sometimes interests that you don't know about that are revealed to you further down the line. But of course, in the beginning, you do need gatekeepers, and don't try to be, extremely brave and say, no, I'm going to go in without it. You do need them, even if maybe you don't necessarily want to work with them down the line. And get comforting things with you. So if you are going for fieldwork and you're going to be spending a lot of time participating and observing in activities, you're going to be tired, you're going to miss home, you're going to miss your comfortable stuff. So you need to get things that make you feel good. And this is really important. Well-being is important. Plan to immerse yourself for at least a few weeks without returning home or to your comfort zone, and plan a holiday afterwards. So this is important for you, but don't do it before a few weeks in, because sometimes it would be seen as you giving up on your research, just as research participants are slowly getting used to you. So it shouldn't be early into fieldwork. You need to stick through it, and it is going to be uncomfortable for the first few weeks. So, initial reactions. When you enter the field, you'll definitely have a culture shock, even if you're studying your own, because you are really trying to shed off all the preconceived notions that you have and start anew. You will feel a culture shock. The first days are definitely hard, but at the end of it, researchers generally have a positive experience out of doing participant observation, generally. And most people are happy with their decision to use this method. But one of the first things that you might feel is you might feel cheated or scammed. This is a very normal reaction to have. It's fine. Because you do not have the power in the first few days, weeks, even months. And you might feel sometimes that you are seen as someone who doesn't know much, you're vulnerable, and it might open up some weird situations for you. So what you really do need to do is be honest that, and transparent, that you're not here to do business, you're not here to financially support, you're not here to work on policies to improve people's lives. This is important as well. You are here to collect data. Some people will not understand what that is in the beginning. You need to prove to them what you mean, but don't be afraid of having a negative reaction in the beginning. You'll definitely feel vulnerable. This is why I'm saying, you do need to rely on gatekeepers in the beginning, even though you will move past them. But remember, it rarely gets worse. Obviously, as long as you're not putting yourself in any risk. Feeling uncomfortable, I mentioned this. This is something that is seen sometimes in anthropology as, the hallmark of good anthropology research and participant observation, when you can't be comfortable, which is an interesting one. You do need to feel uncomfortable. You do need to put yourself in situations that, you wouldn't have before. So be sure that this is normal. Everyone goes through it. You won't be, you have your comfort waiting for you for all the years later, but now is the time for data collection and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. That's it. Feeling awkward. This is a huge word that is used all the time. Just awkward. Sometimes you would be sitting there with people, you don't really know what you should be doing with yourself. At the same time, you want to participate in conversation, but the topic is so alien to you. It's fine. Everyone feels awkward. And remember that you can always, go back and think about it later. But while you're in it, it's okay to feel awkward. And don't try to overcome awkwardness. It's fine. It's part of the deal. Loyalty to your participant group comes first. This is extremely important because there are dynamics that you don't know about, especially when you start fieldwork. You might be hanging out with a group of people that are on bad terms with another group. You don't really know about it. You don't know why. even if there are some pressing issues, and some anthropologists have been put in really difficult situations, including healthcare, including reporting violence, including, doing something because, or calling the police. Maybe that's an extreme case. You should always do that. But in some communities, it takes some time to think about it, and why you should be stepping in. So what I'm trying to say here is really sometimes fieldwork puts you in incredibly difficult circumstances that do not have the correct answer. But even if your first impulse is to act on it, you need to think about it, maybe talk to a few people first before you do anything on your own. And last, it's really okay to ask questions. Nobody is expecting you to arrive and completely blend in. Like, you are going to be, as I said, awkward for a few weeks, months. It's okay to ask questions. You don't need to show that you know everything about the community. You don't need to actively start behaving like they do, or taking up their customs. It's a bit strange if that happens like very quickly as well. And please remember to tell them, if I make a mistake, please correct me. This way you're showing them that this is all part of your learning process, and that you're not perfect, and that if you make mistakes, it's not on purpose. So, and they will also be a little bit more comfortable with telling you what you did wrong if you ask them for it. Okay, so now starting with data
طلع واحد
collection.
من اللي عملنا لهم advocacy طلعت الحكم من
Rena, I think your mic is on. Anyway, so starting with data collection. So the first thing you would want to do when you are working with your research group is you start with things that you can see. This is not involving people. What is really good is to map everything around you. So some people make drawings of where they are, what they do. Some people kind of trace the routes that they're taking every day and how they're changing. It's even like you can even do it with paint, with the application on your PCs or like laptops. Just basically, just something that is a bit visual. And it's important because these things will change with time. You will notice that the way you move around places changes. Physical spaces will mean different things. So if you enter the field, and start with mapping things that you can see, this would be very good for you later down the line. And so that is with things and places. Second of all, trace connections between individuals and write down how you were introduced to research participants. This is an important list to keep with you. Don't lose it, because you never know how you might need to contact that person, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line. So really tracing down the connections, and also when you're meeting someone, remember who introduced you and how you were introduced, because the more you meet people, the larger group is around you. Sometimes you tend to get confused, but these things are very important to keep in mind, and keep it in a notebook, of course. At the very beginning, also, start noticing things, like counting things, describing physical attributes. So these are like the early days of fieldwork. If you are sitting down with in an activist tent, like let's say on a square, which is something that I was doing in my research. In the beginning, I didn't really know who's who, and where I am sitting, who's important, who is not. That's completely fine. Nothing needs to be clear to you, 100% when you start. But keep in mind, how many people are in the room, who's leaving, who's entering, how many women are there, how many men, how involved children are in activities, how much they're not. Like, just count things that might seem very, normal to us, or we don't register them. But if you make a mental note in your head to count, that's a strong way to actually collect data, and it grows with time. And also another thing, describing physical attributes. This is something that also with your research participants might change with time. So make sure that you also describe, who they are and what they look like, because it's important for you for later, but also to understand, what they're going through. So basically what I'm trying to say is notice things. And it is harder to do than you think, because sometimes when you are in a new place, you are just really focused on yourself. Again, the awkwardness, you're really thinking about how you're being perceived. You're really thinking about how you don't want to, upset anyone or touch any sensitivities. But try to calm yourself down in this case. Don't think about your research project. Think about counting. Those things are in the early days, so they're pretty helpful. And you will slowly move from passive observation, which is me sitting in an activist tent, just counting people, which is very passive, to more active observation. And this takes time. Again, nothing happens overnight. It needs introductions. It needs, for you to have the courage to speak up and to slowly be accepted as someone who shows up to these things. And it does not happen automatically at all. And that's also okay. So nothing happens naturally. You need training. Don't stress about it. But also, it would be good for you to write everything down. And we'll get to the note-taking part about what you're feeling in terms of stress and anxiety. Write all of these things down, because these things will pass, most probably, hopefully. And it will be easier for you to be the observer and participant observation method. So yeah, it requires training and what we call being on. So on is you actively listening, taking notes, knowing exactly what kind of notes you're taking, being aware, taking mental snapshots of where you are in case you can't take actual pictures. This is what we call being on, right? And we tend to be on all the time, but also remember to be off. You also need to do fun things with your research participants where you're not collecting data. And you really do turn off. So also try to remember that. So when it comes to data collection, with participant observation, it's all about notes. You can do recording. Obviously, you can, ask for permission to record. This is not always granted. In my experience, you also cannot go around a whole room and ask, okay, can you sign this form? I'm going to record. Your voice is going to be stored in my computer. It's hard. So what you want to do really is take all of these mental, this active kind of participant observation thing that you're doing and write everything down. So how do you do that? Try to write daily. I know this is not easy, but if you are on fieldwork and you're on a mission, I think it's your responsibility to write often, because you have no idea how many details are lost instantly, even from day to day, if you don't write down what happens. An easy way to write down what happens is just following a chronological style. Even, writing down, I woke up at this time in the morning, this person called me, said, hey, are you up for a chat? So I went down, writing in that kind of very non-analytical way is good for you, because it puts you in the habit of just noticing things and writing down very basic things like, what you wore or what time you left the house. These things are important for later. So this kind of chronological writing, it's important. Obviously, you don't need to, stress on important things. You can say something happened in your day, but you don't need to overly, expand on that, because you can have a separate kind of note, which is your event note. So what I found useful when I'm taking down my notes is that I would have two columns. I would have what I did in the day, kind of like who I saw, where was I, what cafe I went to, where did I hang out. And then in the second column, I'll be writing down, events that were happening in in participants' lives, but also in the country or in the location that I was working in. So this way, you are capable of like seeing these two things, and try to separate them, because this is something I learned also the hard way. I was writing almost every day, and it was just a mix of like my thoughts, my anxieties, what I ate for breakfast, also what happened in this person's life. It was just in one document, and it takes time to tease these things out later on. So if you can keep it separated, that would be good. So event notes and then chronological daily, what you did in the day notes. This is helpful. At the end of your kind of notes for the day, it would be good to capture atmospheres. And if you are a social scientist, if you're someone who likes doing anthropology, atmosphere is important. Things like how cold was it that day? What smells did you smell in the square? Was there something burning? That was my experience, for example. Was there some food being prepared? These things are not only important for you when you write up, in terms of like having good data. It's also important for you to be transported back into these locations and these moments. And sometimes through your senses, through remembering what you sensed, it's easier to remember what you saw and what kind of conversations you had. So it's a good way to kind of place yourself back in your field. And then, as we said in the very beginning, participant observation is very iterative. So there's a lot of reflexivity that goes on. Reread your notes, maybe not every few days, like every few weeks. Read it, see what has changed, see how, what's been happening. It kind of keeps you having a grip on your research project. So that is your notebook. This is like your data notebook. There are other notebooks that it's really good to have when you're doing participant observation. I know I wrote down 5, but you can pair them up. So the second notebook or the second document, which is good to have, is writing down all of your feelings and thoughts about yourself, about your work. So remember when I told you that in my case, I put everything together. Sometimes I noticed rereading my notes later was that I was so concerned with how I was feeling, and I wanted to feel good and comfortable, and that the data was slipping away a little bit. So and it was hard to locate it back in all of these like entries where I'm just like discussing what is happening, because also I was conducting fieldwork when there was an uprising, so a lot of emotions there. But having a separate notebook about what you're feeling and experiencing is better. Notebook 3, this is important for your data analysis, but it is good for you to have a copy, like obviously everything is written on your laptop. It's good to have a copy of your field notes, your notebook 1, the one in the last slide, and slowly, start adding in like little references, things that remind you of a reading you read. Write it down in the comments. But keep it separate, like still keep your original field notes, which are without these extra comments. This notebook 3, the notebook where you have your data and with like references to outside readings, this is what is going to be your data that you will write up. So this is the most important notebook. It's the analysis. So remember when we were saying that participant observation is all about, it's a tool for collection and analysis. This is where it comes in, because while you are adding your references, while you're adding your comments, you're still going on with participating and observing with your interlocutors. So it really is it needs to happen at the same time. It's actually quite useful. Other things, other documents that are useful to have is write down your questions, even the simplest ones. And this is a fascinating thing, because when you start fieldwork and start participant observation, you might have so many questions, very simple ones, that maybe 6 months down the line, you look back and you're like, oh, how could I have asked such a question? Or how could I have not known this? Like, it seems ridiculous. But it's good to see how far you've come along. And also, when you will be writing up your paper or your thesis, the readers of your paper and your thesis still don't know the answers to those very simple questions like you do. So you need to contextualize everything you're saying as if you're meeting it for the first time, so even the simplest things like, why do people do this? Or why do people talk like this? Or why does this man from this, I don't know, like ethnic minority, for example, has the priority to talk in such a setting? Like, these are things that you will figure out really quickly, but your readers in the future have no idea about. So you need to keep it in mind. And then at the end of the day, useful phrases, things that are interesting, information, codes of conduct, things that are useful for you. You can keep this with you, forever. And this is also a bit of a souvenir for you, I think, when you look back at your work, things that were, just useful for you at that time. You never know how they will be useful in the future. And now I'm not sure, maybe we can have like a conversation about this in the Q&A, but maybe a lot of you use, Teams or Zoom for interviews, for, even doing things like attending meetings that you use as participant observation data. And obviously technology is getting easier. Just even for me, the ability to, record an interview and transcribe it, have a software transcribe it is amazing. But at the same time, it makes you lazy. It stops you from, especially if you're doing participant observation and you're going into the field, the build up of experiences, the build up of, ways how you write down your notes, the evolution of your own note taking is the most important skill you're getting out of this. So the way you kind of refine your own data collection is your asset. If you're using technology to kind of for shortcuts, it's great for some things. Obviously, if it's something that is useful and fast, and you need it to be done, that's fine. But keep in mind that it's all about the skill you're developing through your note taking and through a part, because note taking is really when you're putting your observations into paper. So just beware of that. So you notice that the analysis part is very short, and that is because you already are doing analysis when you're writing up your notes. When you are kind of having this chronological versus event separation. So there are softwares to use where, we use coding. I personally did not use that, but it's helpful for a lot of research, obviously. And again, sometimes because participant observation is such an exciting tool, you can do a lot of participant observation with different things, different topics, different groups. It's endless and it's limitless. You really need to keep in mind your general hypothesis and your research question. And sometimes it's helpful, it will change. Sometimes when you're doing participant observation, your hypothesis is completely irrelevant to the community that you're studying. But keep in mind that you still do need this grounding. And for anthropology, because we tend to develop our frameworks after data collection, sometimes we can get lost in it. So for you to keep in mind your general hypothesis, it sounds simple, but actually there's a lot going on behind this. As I said, you're already analyzing as you go, so don't overstress about it. And most important thing, obviously, is reflecting on your notes. And also what I forgot to mention, when it comes to ethics and when it comes to your identity, so your gender, your race, your class, make sure you also read your notes through that angle. Try to see how things are changing for you. Try to see if people are reacting to you in a certain way. These are very useful in the writing up. Okay, we're kind of heading to the finish line here, but biases and undesirable challenges. So as we said, and I think it might be relevant for this group, studying your own. We don't look at the everyday as something different. The everyday is something we experience, we live. We do need to take a few steps back and really assume sometimes that we're newcomers. And it's a difficult exercise to do, actually. But things that seem normal to you are not normal to others. Again, you need to explain it to your future readers. Documenting events rather than everyday practices. This is something that is actually important to talk about a little bit, because if you are building up your research just on events and just on things that are short-term, experienced in a short duration, it's easier to take notes about it because there's a lot of background research that can help you with this, right? But what is more valuable is documenting everyday practices. So again, like having those two columns, your everyday and then the events, make sure it's not only about the events. Compassion bias. This happens a lot. The longer we are doing participant observation and the longer we're in the field, we really do bond with our informants. We have relationships with them, friendships, we have strong bonds with them. We tend to sometimes have something called compassion bias, which is we really try to portray our subjects in an overly positive light. And this is common also in people who are studying resistance or activist groups or marginalized communities, and it's important. But at the same time, try to maintain a level of the observer and not the extremely emotionally invested researcher. Obviously, few of the best works in anthropology come from people who are extremely compassionate, and we all are. But at the same time, as a reader, reading your work, it's sometimes less comfortable to read a very, very romantic account of something. We still want to maintain some degree of, this is still a study. So this is a sensitive point. I would love to get your feedback on this in the Q&A. But be respectful, obviously, but also don't overly romanticize. Boredom, this is something that will happen. It's also normal, the same way as awkwardness. Another thing that might happen, which is a difficult one actually, which is disenchantment, when suddenly you feel that what you are hearing and what you are participating in does not speak to you anymore. This is why it's very important to be clear with your intentions when you're studying a research group. Before you do participant observation, be very clear with your intentions, and be sure that you will face challenges along the way, and try to mitigate them. And also fieldwork is long, so it takes a little bit of grit to get over things. So make sure you know that it might happen. And then the last one, also an important one, crisis of representation. This also happens a lot. Kind of knowing what voice, where to locate your voice as a social researcher. Also a little bit related to activist scholarship. You really want to represent the group that you're studying in the most positive light. But sometimes things are a bit more complicated. You also don't want to portray them in a negative light. So this crisis of representation, where to situate your voice, how you need to be very clear that you're filtering all the data that you're receiving through yourself, who has a particular gender identity, class identity, and a racial identity. Just be very clear about that and honest. And I think one of the best things to do in this case is be very transparent about this when you're writing up. So leaving the field, this is when we have taken down all of our notes. We have built relationships with our informants. Make sure that they are still able to contact you, and don't promise things you can't fulfill, such as coming back soon. And I feel that this is sometimes you also slip into overly polite ways of saying goodbye, which is like, yes, see you soon. I will be back. Here's my number. Like, call me anytime. Don't promise things that you can't fulfill. It's better to keep things, as honest as possible, even if it means that you won't talk to some people for a while because you're traveling or you need to go back, to your university and you need to do stuff. Sometimes be clear about it, because if you don't do it and people are expecting these things from you, it might put you in a undesirable situation. Make sure you say goodbye properly. Mark the end of your fieldwork. And express gratitude. So this is something that it's good to keep in mind, because you're not going to be there forever, hopefully. And say goodbye in a respectful way. I think show people that you respect them, you respect the data that you got by living with them, by sharing their experiences, and give it its weight. You will experience reverse culture shock, totally normal. It's going to happen. And you will miss your fieldwork days. You will miss who you were when you were doing your participant observation, but this will also ease with time. And of course, take some time off before writing up. You need a vacation because you are working for a long time. Participant observation is work. It's not just hanging out. It's not just having a good time. It's work. So take some time off before you revisit your notebooks.